Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you of the brand new BZ-176, which was released yesterday inside loot boxes inside the game. This vehicle has a 160mm main armament, which will now be the hardest hitting gun that's available on a heavy tank at tier 8. This premium also comes with a brand new feature, which are literally rocket boosters on the back of the vehicle, which you have a limited number of charges to use through the battle. This vehicle is an absolute monster of a tank, and today I'm going to be showing you some gameplay to let you know exactly why, and why this vehicle is arguably the new best tier 8 heavy tank in the game. So firstly, as this is a brand new mechanic, let's talk about how the rocket boosters on the back of the BZ-176 work. So they will boost your engine power from 600 horsepower up to 1,500 horsepower. However, they are of limited charges, and when you activate them, you can't stop boosting. You have 4 charges all the way through the battle, and they do not recharge if you don't use the jet boosters. And once you've boosted, it will give you that extra 900 horsepower for 10 seconds. Now be warned, when you boost, your traverse speed is going to be incredibly limited, so it's not a good idea to boost unless you want to go into a straight line. But it will increase your top speed limit from 30 forwards and 15 backwards to 45 forwards, but only 1 kilometer backwards. And interestingly enough, a turbo actually scales with the booster functionality. And so if you look at a Bounty Turbo, which will increase the top speed limit by 5 forwards and 3 backwards, when you boost, the new top speed limit of the vehicle is actually going to be 53, meaning that the rockets actually make a flat percentage increase of the vehicle, which will include your turbo charger, which now gives you 8 kilometers an hour faster forwards. And I expect that if you use a Bond turbo on this vehicle, that will give you 9 kilometers an hour faster forwards. The jet boosters also scale with the turbocharger on the vehicle, meaning that you can gain 3 horsepower per ton when you're using the rockets and 1.24 horsepower per ton when you're not using the rockets with a turbo. Long story short, turbos with rockets combine to create outrageous results, meaning that when you're boosting, if you're using a turbo, this is going to be the fastest tier 8 heavy tank in the game, more so than the AMX 5100 or the FCM 50T, having pretty much about 50% more engine power than those vehicles and going quicker as well. However, I'd like to stress that when you use the rockets on this vehicle, the top speed limit is actually limited, unlike other vehicles, where if you're going downhill, you're going to be able to get a speed boost. And so don't use rockets if you're going to go downhill. You might actually end up going slower than you would do if you were to get naturally up to the vehicle's top speed. Thus, the boosters are best used for when you're going uphill or your vehicle is not naturally able to reach its top speed limit. So before we get stuck into the gameplay and I show you what this vehicle is capable of, I'm going to try and compare this tank to other vehicles. And the funny thing is, there's nothing really to compare this to, as it does have that new boost functionality, but also the gun is just so bizarre. The only other truly large caliber gun that you're going to be getting at tier 8 is going to be on the calibre on a heavy tank. Now, the funny thing is that the BZ-176 comes with 2 kinds of ammunition, an armor-piercing round and a premium high-explosive round. Now, the premium high explosive round not only has higher alpha damage at 800 compared to 650, but it also has 225mm of penetration compared to 208 on the standard round, meaning that this is literally just a pay-to-win shell. Not only are you going to have more penetration, but you're also going to have more alpha damage, and you're also going to have to pay for it because this shell costs 7,200 credits. Now, this is weird because on something like a Caliban, your premium shell is actually an armor-piercing round, and the armor-piercing round costs 4,800 credits. And while it's only hitting for 600 compared to the 800 high-explosive premium round on the BZ-176, that kind of makes... It's definitely the best way to play the Caliban, is just to spam premium rounds with the armor-piercing rounds, and you actually end up still making a half-decent amount of credits profit as long as you're not whiffing your shells. With the BZ-176, on the other hand, if you fail to pen these extravagantly expensive premium rounds, you will be losing credits quite substantially. Now, of course, there is one tremendous advantage with the armor piercing rounds on this vehicle, and that is because this is a 160mm caliber gun, you can overmatch so many plates inside the game. Up to 53mm of armor this vehicle will be overmatching. And so that means, for example, let's say you're playing against a Super Conqueror. Well, many people might not realize that the top of the Super Conqueror is 50.8mm thick. Now you might think, does that 0.8 make much of an advantage? Yes, it does. Because of the way that the overmatch works inside the game, a Super Conqueror will always be able to ricochet off the top of the vehicle 152mm caliber guns. That's why Wargaming have put that 0.8 in, because there are so many 152mm caliber guns, and it's only really the American guns, the 155mm, which will overmatch the Super Conqueror. Now, I go into great depth here because it's super important to realize that these armor-piercing rounds on the BZ-176 with their 160mm will be able to overmatch so many plates that you might not realize. 50mm roofs, no problem. 50.8mm roofs, no problem. 53mm roofs, no problem. Engine decks, no problem. Bellies of tanks, no problem. And that makes these armor-piercing rounds often way better because they're guaranteed to penetrate certain plates which can be very large compared to the high explosive rounds that won't penetrate them and might do substantially less damage. And also you're paying a lot more. So keep that in mind, that quite often you're best to load the armor piercing rounds and do for 1,400 credits and do substantially more damage. Now, I'm going to compare the BZ-176 as if it's firing its regular rounds compared to the Caliban as if it's firing its premium rounds, because that just makes the most sense. But obviously in this comparison, also take into account that this vehicle does have an 800 damage HE shell with 225mm of pen. So right off the bat, bad damage per minute on a vehicle like this, 1,560. But as many of us will know, when you hit so hard, damage per minute kind of goes out the window. And I've been doing more damage in this vehicle than I have been doing in all of my other tier 8 heavies, even though it doesn't have the DPM, because you're hitting twice as hard as they are. And that enables you to have to fire much less often. And it's very rare in World of Tanks that you're actually firing on reload. Now, this also provides interesting opportunities for this vehicle as, should you use a gun rammer to try and improve the rate of fire? Or should you try and invest into other areas of the vehicle? In the end, that's going to be up to you. I will be giving you my recommendations later on. So 650 damage, the new hardest hitting tier 8. Previously, it would have been the side-scraping VK7501K with 490 alpha damage, and this thing, well, it just absolutely smashes. And if you're able to pen those 800 damage Hesh rounds, which is quite possible with 225mm of pen, then you're hitting harder than even tier 10 heavy tanks are with their armor piercing rounds. Now, of course, you could argue that something like a KV2 has like 900 damage with its HE rounds. Yeah, but those only have about 90mm of pen at best, whereas this one is 225 and very easy to pen on quite a few plates, as we'll be seeing later on in the gameplay. One thing that's funky about this vehicle is the shell velocity is not bad like the Caliban. It goes at 860 and that's perfectly workable. And if we look at the high explosive rounds, the shell velocity is 760, which definitely isn't great. But you will be able to snipe in this tank way better than the Caliban. If not just because of that shell velocity, but also because its aiming time is way better at 3.5. Its accuracy is horrendous, but still way better at 0.46. And its gun handling when you move doesn't feel as if you're creating a pineapple or some kind of a new universe in the center of your screen. Combine that with 20 degrees of elevation, which makes it flexible when your opponents are above you, and 10 degrees of depression, which means that you're easily able to work a ridgeline against your opponents, and this thing is looking like a monster. Now, the speed of this vehicle is up and down, right? If you want to look at the rocket booster functionality, 30 forwards is really poor, but 15 backwards is really nice. So you can pull back over a ridgeline way quicker than your opponents are probably expecting. The power to weight ratio of this vehicle is incredibly lackluster at 10.5, but remember that's going to go up to near 30 if you're using a turbo and you're using those rocket boosters, although you've only got 40 seconds of boosting in an entire battle, and it's not flexible with being able to turn and so on and so forth. But it allows you to get through those stressful bursty situations where you might be sitting in a kill zone, for example. The traverse speed on this vehicle and the turret is not bad at 29 degrees, and the tank's traverse is not bad at 29 as well. And once you get the field mods that improve the ground resistances, yeah, that will really help out. Now, what is crazy about this vehicle is the armor. We're talking about 240 at the front of the hull, 152 on the side, and 60 at the rear, meaning it's still hard for most HE rounds to go in. But you've got 250 on the turret, 152, and 60 on the side. And so that means that this thing's armor is just absolutely tremendous. Look at this, 320 on the front of the turret. And the top of the vehicle, it's 41 millimeters thick, and that 1 millimeter makes a huge difference, because that now means that 122 millimeter caliber guns, of which there's so many in the game, are not able to overmatch the top of this tank, unlike the Vipera, which has a 40 millimeter top and is overmatchable by so many more guns. Now, keep in mind that the top of this turret will be overmatched by 130mm caliber guns, such as on the IS-7, WZ-111 and even 128mm caliber guns like you're having on German tanks. And so if you've got a big caliber gun that's bigger than 122, shoot this thing in the top of the turret and you're going to make it wince. But good luck seeing the top of the turret when it's using its 10 degrees of gun depression, apart from this. Look at this funky design. Part of the turret roof kind of comes through, or I guess when the gun just comes up. So this is actually a weak point. And so if the vehicle is using its gun depression to try and shoot you, you can fire high explosive rounds at this. Or if you have a 124mm caliber gun, you can fire armor-piercing rounds at this and you will go through it every single time because it's an overmatch mechanic as well. So use this knowledge to be able to fight back against these BZ-176s because they are not going to give you any mercy. And apart from that, with regards to the armor, is there any opportunities to overmatch the flaps? Yes, all 76mm caliber guns can shoot up into the vehicle here, so take advantage of that. But if you can't use these overmatch mechanics, then the lower plate is like 130, and so the BZ-176 should try and do everything that it can to hide that, and it is a vulnerability on the vehicle against even high penetration, high explosive rounds like on this tank. Now, when you're playing a BZ-176, you can side scrape very well in this vehicle because look at this side armor. It's incredibly thick and it's well angled, and there's very little opportunities for your opponents to be able to deal with that. And it gets to 70 degrees of angling, which will bounce all armor-piercing rounds. And the 100mm of side armor with very little gap between the tracks and the hull, and a thick tracks as well to be able to go over it, means that you can kind of over-angle this tank and really get away with it. This thing is a little juggernaut. It's incredibly heavily armored for a vehicle that has so much damage potential. Add to that 1,550 hit points, which are definitely not special, but not terrible for this tier. And this is a real advantage to this vehicle, 380 meters view range, which means that you pretty much won't ever need to use coated optics on this tank if you have a very good crew, and you're still going to be able to spot your opponents at decent distances. And that's great because we don't want to use coated optics, right? We want to be using things that are going to try and help us get around or do damage as well. So it's a tremendous advantage for this vehicle. Next, the chance for this tank to be set on fire is 12%, but I'm not sure if there's some funky mechanic with huge fuel tanks down the side, but I've been set on fire multiple times in this vehicle and I've only played it like 10 or 20 times. So be warned that maybe even a firefighting crew could be advantageous on this vehicle, or just use a fire extinguisher and don't be paid to win like me. So a lot of you will be looking at this as an opportunity to train up some Chinese crews. And really it's a very simple crew: commander, gunner, driver, loader, where the commander is also the radio operator. Now this is kind of annoying because if you like the 113, all 5 of you out there who like the 113, the 113, it's actually the loader that's the radio operator, whereas for the WZ-111 it's the commander that's the radio operator. So I thoroughly recommend you use your 5A crew in this vehicle and not your 113 crew in this vehicle, as otherwise you could be missing out on situational awareness, which will allow you to pump up your view range to a point where you don't need coated optics on this vehicle. Now, equipment-wise, I personally think that this is the kind of tank that can use a variety of different equipments. I'm just going to let you know what works for me. What has worked for me is having 2 setups. The first setup is going to be vent, gun rammer, and an aiming device. And you might be thinking, oh, QB, you're not using vert stabs with a vehicle that actually has quite poor gun handling and poor aim time. And I agree with you. However, I really want to have the vents on this vehicle because the vents improve the tank's tragic accuracy, and you will need that for decent distances. And also I'm using an aiming device in this vehicle, and I thoroughly recommend you take a firepower slot and put an aiming device in that slot if possible, because it scales very well on this tank. And you improve that horrible accuracy where you're investing all of that damage in a single shot into actually being able to hit your shot. I use this same reasoning on a Jagdpanzer E100 and something like an FV405, where I don't use a gun rammer, but I'm just trying to pump up the accuracy so I can actually hit my big shells. Because if you miss them, you lose all of the pressure of the battle. And there's no point in pumping up damage or pumping up your mobility into other areas or improving your gun handling if you can't actually hit the shots. And so try it, see what works for you. But personally for me, I'm definitely using an aiming device on this vehicle, and it has been working. And as you can see, I've done everything that I can to try and pump up that accuracy with the vents and with the accuracy device. Now I'm personally still using a gun rammer on this vehicle, and this is for those close quarters situations. There are so many maps in the game, like Lakeville, Live Oaks, and for example the hill on Malinovka, where it doesn't really matter about if you're using a turbo. You can use the boosts to get up the hill and to race into position. But what matters is trading accurately in those scenarios. And so this build is just pumping up the damage, pumping up the accuracy, and turning this thing into something really deadly on a ridgeline that's able to outtrade its opponents. I will have a second build on this vehicle, and this is for those situations where I want to have a turbo, where again, I kind of wanted to just do some testing with the rocket boosters, but also this could be a good build for certain maps where it's really important to get into position first. I'm talking about mines. If you wanted to try and claim the hill, for example, if you could get into position quickly by boosting a couple of times, you could be able to trash the enemy light tank with an HE shell before it begins. But a lot of people would like to actually just not use the turbo at all in either of their two builds and instead use a durability device. Maybe drop like the gun rammer or the vents to be able to use that in conjunction with an aiming device. Again, this is the kind of tank that I'd like to use 5 different pieces of equipment on. I'm just trying to arm you so that you can make the best decision possible. But if you want to go for like a one-size-fits-all for all of the maps, then I'd recommend this one with a vent, gun rammer, and an aiming device. Next, for the field mods, this vehicle, I want to use all-terrain suspension, and I'm using all-terrain suspension to be able to improve my mobility. Next, I'm going to be taking accuracy on this vehicle instead of the aiming speed, because what's the point of... You can always aim longer, but you can't make up for bad RNG with regards to accuracy in World of Tanks. And then finally, I'm taking view range. And this allows me, as I said, to get up to 456 meters view range with, albeit bounty vents and a premium consumable, which means I'll never need coated optics. And then for selecting the slot, I'm probably going to end up taking a firepower slot on this vehicle if I don't have access to bounty accuracy device, and putting a standard accuracy device in that will boost it up massively. So that's all you really need to know about the BZ-176. I think it's about time to show you what this beast can do on the battlefield. Alright, so here we go, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to be rolling out in our BZ-176. And this vehicle, of course, we spawned up on the hill on Malinovka. We're going to try and get there as quickly as we can, right? Let's boost. And there you go. There you have it. 10 seconds of increased engine power. And I'm not using a turbo. This is my accuracy build. We were going at 45 kilometers an hour up the hill. Well, let's just boost away. And look at this. We're getting up on the hill faster than quite fast heavy tanks like a Patriot that got a more favorable spawn. And what happens when we get up on the hill? Well, why don't we use the right kind of ammunition, you know? Why don't we use the high explosive rounds? And the BZ-176 is at first into position, faster than any of the vehicles. And oh, look, a poor little light tank. Well, how about you start the battle with 75% hit points off? And ladies and gents, that was a low roll. That was only rolling for 726 out of the 800 average damage. And look, I could probably just stop the video here and just say that's what this tank does. It gets into position quickly with its boosts, and then it delivers a shell to vehicles that thought that they were going to be quick there, and they're just not quick there anymore. This vehicle is outrageous for situations like that. How about hitting weak points on top of tier 8 American heavy tanks like the M3Y for 849 damage. Now, I'd like to clarify, those 2 shells, they cost me 7,200 credits each. So I've already spent 14,000 credits worth of ammunition this game. But I've dealt 1,600 damage, and I'm turning this game into my team's favor. Next, I want to highlight just how important intuition is on this vehicle. I've switched out, and then now these shells are a lot cheaper. Now they're down to about like 1,300 credits or 1,500 credits. But we still hit for the average roll of 659 in this tank. And do you see what I mean about the damage per minute on this vehicle? While the reload is long, it is incredibly long. When you hit this hard, doesn't even matter. Now in this situation, I probably could have fired a high explosive round there, but I didn't feel like it was safe to do the intuition switch. Vent on this vehicle helps the intuition scale very well. You're going to have it on your loader, and another thing is the premium consumable will help with this tank with intuition switching as well. So this vehicle, it scales very well with cruise skills. It might even be one that you want to put like bounty vents on, purely so you can get the intuition time down. And yeah, goodbye, sweetheart. Sure, this doesn't have the best penetration on its regular rounds of 208, but that's still enough for hulls of glass cannony medium tanks like that. And within the first 3 minutes of this battle, we're up to 3,000 damage, and my paint has not even been scratched so far. Now I'm making my way up over this slope, and you'll see that I'm switching to an HE round, thinking about zinging the Progetto, and then I think to myself, no, there was like an ISU that was spotted below me, and you'll see that I'm turning my turret to the left and the right to try and protect me, and while the aiming time is long, look how accurate we actually get with this derpy gun. It's not bad. The accuracy is not bad. And I'd like to clarify, this is my first ever game I played in this tank, and so I don't have the field mod that also increases my accuracy by an extra 3%. So get yourself an aiming device, get yourself some vents, get yourself some Brothers in Arms, a premium consumable, get yourself the field mod, and just get clapping. This is outrageous. I'm up to 4,600 damage in less than 4 minutes. Sure, I've been, I guess, firing on reload pretty much after we rocket boosted to get to the top of the hill. But trust me, this was not an unusual situation for this vehicle. This gun, it just feels so easy to use if you're the kind of player who can make a Caliban work. And I'd like to clarify that. But I think one of the reasons why this tank works for me is because I like my big derpy guns. Apart from on the FV405. I hate the FV405. But I have good knowledge of enemies' weak points. I have good knowledge of overmatch mechanics. And, well, I definitely don't have the best aim. It's okay, at least occasionally. So I'm going for armor-piercing rounds here because I'm trying to overmatch where the gun comes through the top of the tank. It's the part that hopefully you remember from the armor review. You didn't skip it, right? You didn't skip the first 20 minutes of the video, right, boys and girls? You can overmatch this with 124mm caliber guns with armor-piercing rounds. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. Heat rounds could probably also manage to go through that part. But remember, heat rounds will go up through up to 85 degrees of angled armor. Dang, there's somebody managed to shave the BZ-176, but thank goodness I'm firing armor-piercing rounds. And this vehicle, while it definitely has a long aim time, and you'll see that I'm raising my guns slightly in between my shells there to try and avoid getting hit. And I'm trying to help out this BZ-176 on my team, but unfortunately I've only got an armor-piercing round loaded here, and HE would actually be better, because it would have higher pen and would be able to go through. So I'm thinking about going through the side here, and you'll see that I fired, but he just turned as I clicked. So a misplay there by me. I should have gone for that lower plate, but it did look like I had a fairly high chance of going through the side there, but I should have fired HE his lower plate, and then I might have been able to do an extra 800. Nevertheless, we still do okay. We get 500 assistance on the tracking there, and now I'm going to try and go for the top of his tank. Yeah, the bad accuracy is starting to rear its ugly head. As soon as you start to get to within this like 200-meter distance that the BZ-176 is away from me, you are taking your chances. But what I want to clarify about this vehicle is big guns like this are nothing new. You know, big guns like this are nothing new. Right into the overmatch weak point. The thing is that most tanks that have big guns like this can't just sit in the open and have like 300 millimeters of effective turret armor. Sure, it can be overmatched on top, but that's if you're not using your gun depression. This front hull is insane. The upper hull is insane. The turret armor is insane. This tank, yeah, it's pretty good. Maybe I got you there. No, it is. It is insane. It's absolutely crazy. I look at this as a bit like a Type 5 Heavy back in the day when the Type 5 had those really good HE rounds. Does anyone remember when the Type 5 Heavy had, I think it was either like 192 or was it 230 millimeters of penetration? And I think it had something stupid like 1,500 damage or something insane like that before Wargaming ended up nerfing it, which is one of the best things they did. Now, I make a bit of a misplay here and rewind the video and slow it down at that moment. You'll notice that while I'm trying to loop the shell over at the Progetto, right at the end, I actually put my reticle over one of the tiny little, I guess the viewports on that IS-2 too. And that means that the reticle now thinks that I'm shooting at something directly in front of it and then puts my gun down. Split-second misjudgment there. And unfortunately, it could be game-losing. Despite the fact that I've done over 5,000 damage, despite the fact that I've killed 4 vehicles, I now find myself in a 2 versus 5 scenario. So we know that the enemy just managed to finish off one of my vehicles that was over towards our spawn location. So I've got to try and get over there as quick as I can. Now, luckily for me, I'm on full hit points, and luckily for me, the T-103 is on full hit points, and I'm now indicating where I'm going. And I also try and communicate as well. I stopped them flanking. Simple words. No need to use the boosts right now, although I guess I could have boosted over into position. But really, I want to save the boost for if I get into a tricky situation where, if, say, my sixth sense goes off or I get caught out in the open, like now. One shell misses me, and I got a funny feeling that I'm getting spotted from this kind of area. And I decide to switch to an HE shell, and maybe that was a misplay. Maybe I should have fired an armor-piercing round there. But I really wanted to fire the HE to have a 50-50 chance of taking on the TVP. I asked the T-103 to go and handle the vehicle that's flanking me in the form of the M3Y, and now I bounce the Stritzfang, sorry, 81. Now we're going to go for his hull armor, but the HE shell can actually go through the side there when he just gives me the flat on side. So we've got a T-54 Mod 1 down towards our south firing gold rounds at us, but again, I'm not really too concerned. He can hit my lower plate. He might be able to hit one of the weak points on top of the tank. Luckily for me, the T-103 handles the M3Y, and he's also handled the Progetto as well, so we've changed a 2 versus 5 into now a 2 versus 2. And you'll see that I was quite hyped up. This was my first game in this tank, and I saw some World of Tanks magic happening. And so I'm asking the T-103 to come and help me, because I'm pinging where the T-54 is. But there's the Spatuk, and we decide to drop the hammer on that clutch shot. And yeah, just a casual 805 damage. You know, he pretty much had all of their hit points that they started the battle on, and we just took them. We just gobbled them up. Just like that. We're up to 6,400 damage and 6 kills in 9.5 minutes in my first ever game. And it's really weird because the T-103 is still driving over towards the west as if he thinks the T-54. And you'll see that I'm getting a little bit agitated. I ping the map multiple times and I say, he is here. He is here. I ping the map again and I say, he is here. And the reason for that is I just don't want to go in by myself, really. And if the T-103 comes over with me, then at least if I die because I get set on fire or maybe I get a low roll, then they're still going to be able to help. I say, over here! But it doesn't seem to be the case. Luckily for me, the T-54 decides to come out. He actually shoots me on the move and manages to hit my lower plate. There you go. I mean, I pretty much knew everything there is to know about this vehicle in the very first game that I played about it. It is god tier on a ridgeline. You ricochet everything, you've got that big boy gun. And what do your opponents do? Well, I guess when more people know how this vehicle works, maybe they'll try and flank it during its reloads. This thing is just staggering. It's possibly the best tier 8 premium that I ever had a first game in, and this wasn't just a one-off. So unfortunately, What Replays doesn't allow me to upload games of the new BZ-176, but luckily the What Replays analyzer still works. Yeah, this game was 1,958 base experience. Nice way to christen the tank. And I almost feel bad that I have to play the tank even more because it was sitting up there at the top of my service record forever. I would have loved to have left it there. but come on, I have to get the review, and also I'm going to want to use this thing to make some credits over the years. Just a disgusting amount of damage, 6,500 for a tier 8, destroying half of the enemy team. Not a bad start for this vehicle. So this time we're rolling out on Berlin in, once again, a nice matchup. Now, let me clarify, I'm not going to be showing you any gameplay against high-tier tanks today. And obviously you should realize, well, firstly, let me highlight that was probably one of the worst boosts that I could ever do. See, I had to slow down to go around the corner, incredibly awkward. You only want to boost when you know you've got about 10 seconds of being able to go in a straight line. Terrible boost. I'm not going to be showing you any gameplay against higher tier vehicles today, but let me clarify that this vehicle, it doesn't do very well against tier 9s or tier 10s compared to how it does against the tier 8 and lower tanks. So please keep that in mind. Now we're going to be using the boosters to go across this very dangerous location to be able to get into a hull down scenario in the window. And oh, hello there, what a collection of vehicles. It'd be a crying shame if somebody was to remove, I don't know, half your hit points at the start of the battle. Even with a low roll, that is 751 off the TNH 105 1000. And so in this situation, it's about just trying to figure out, do the enemies know about my weak points? And also, one thing that I'm worried about right now is I was kind of thinking that maybe the viewports on this vehicle weren't in the correct location. Do you notice how it just feels as if we might be looking out of the actual viewports of the vehicle rather than the gun? But I think it's just because of the way that the gun raises on the roof. And the last thing I want to do is to get caught here. I'm quite lucky that the BZ-176, who was fully aimed, missed me. Luckily, I managed to get them. And if you're wondering why I'm auto-aiming here, I'm doing a test to see where the viewports are. And no, I'm incorrect. It is actually fine. And you are looking out the gun on this vehicle, unlike some of Wargaming's recent releases in years. Okay, so I'm fully aimed, and it looks like we've got about the same reload, suggesting to me that he's using a gun ram event and a premium consumable as well. But luckily, my shell goes in, so maybe he wasn't using the aiming device. And he misses my tank, I managed to hit his. And now I know that I've got as good of a reload as you can get without a bond rammer and a bond vent, and the guy definitely backs off in this situation, probably realizing he doesn't want to lose another half of his hit points. That's just how hard this vehicle hits. But again, I want to go back to my point that this vehicle does not do very well against tier 9s and tier 10s. And if you really wanted me to show some gameplay of where I play against some tier 9s and tier 10s that just play badly and let me overmatch them, or they let me get their side, then I'm not interested in that. However, what I felt is that instead of making this video like an hour long, I just highlight that to you, and no, I'm going to conclude about it. So what we saw there was the Viper's weak hull armor on the top versus 160mm armor-piercing round. This tank does need good knowledge of enemy weak points and plates to work. It's not a regular kind of shell. It's the kind of shell where you have to know about how good the enemy's armor is. The low penetration but high caliber on this round is not conventional. It's kind of like your derpy low-tier rounds, as if you're playing some kind of KV2. However, you're not playing at tier 6 anymore, and not everything has terrible armor. Poor shot there by me. I should have aimed that a little bit lower against the IS-6 Black Edition, and I definitely didn't deserve to penetrate. I would have got lucky if I had. So this vehicle will really test your knowledge of plates inside the game. And so I think that there are going to be quite a few players who get in there and just fire 7,200 credits a shot, and they don't pen many things, and they wonder why the vehicle isn't working. And that's because they probably don't have intuition. They're not switching between their shells and knowing the weak points of your opponents to be able to make low penetration armor piercing shells work compared to just whiffing HE shells. One thing that does suck about this vehicle, however, is there's pretty much nothing that you can do if you're in a glass cannon tank to stop one of these Chinese behemoths from just rushing in and just absolutely clapping you. And considering that they've got 800 damage, if I'm in an AMX CDC, there's nothing that I can do. They can pretty much just auto my tank and spank me, and that's it. I've just got to take it. Or hopefully manage to then punish them afterwards. So just like this, the Viper manages to put one shell in, but I know they've got a 6-second intra-clip reload. They back their vehicle up, exposing their horrible top turret armor, and so that allows me to chunk them down for another 679. This thing, with 10 degrees of gun depression, decent turret armor, just feels awesome. And the BZ-176 shuts down the Viper. Then I managed to shut down the... then the BZ-176 shuts them down, and I'm going to load an HE round. I'm going to tank one shell from the TNH, and then I'm going to put one round right onto the top of the BZ-176. And that's actually a low roll there. 724 damage. And he actually boosts to come forwards to try and come after me. He doesn't look like he really liked that. And then I was going to boost forwards to then possibly ram him, but he actually stopped in an awkward situation because I didn't want him to be able to get me. And now I'd like to highlight that because I'm boosting, I was only able to go backwards at 1 kilometer an hour. And luckily, I'm on 16 hit points. That guy low rolled like an absolute... I'm very lucky. And then I waste an HE shell into a defender. So I just wanted to show that section of the gameplay because, God, I played awful. I played absolutely awfully in every single way. I thought about boosting to try and ram the guy to stop him from doing 800 damage to me. And then I spent 7,200 credits to do 88 damage to the defender, which is absolutely horrendous. And I got lucky that the TNH didn't finish me off because they low rolled. Instead of hitting for 320, they only hit for 254, which is absolutely awful. So this tank, it's very easy to fall into pitfalls. It's kind of a bit of a noob trap in a way. And it's a really tricky one because I feel that it's kind of idiot-proof with the way that the armor on the vehicle is. And it's kind of idiot-proof because you're able to out-trade every single vehicle because you've just got more alpha damage than them. But there are so many ways that you can get yourself into stupid situations with the BZ-176s that on the first day of playing, I had so many silly moments where I did stupid things and also the enemy did stupid things as well. Alright, so we just bludgeoned our way through the town. We didn't play perfectly. I'm still learning this vehicle. But even with suboptimal plays, we're up to 4,400 damage and 300 assistance. And hopefully you can all learn from my experiences, which is probably what is meant from a review, right? So that if you decide to get your hands on this vehicle, because the only way that you're going to be able to get them, at least for now, is going to be gambling in loot crates, that, yeah, you can avoid making the same mistakes. Now, I want to take this moment as well to clarify that do not feel, no matter how good this tank is, and no matter how much praise I'm going to heap on it from being an absolute weapon of war, that you have to get this tank. Because Wargaming will sell it in the future. It might take 6 months, it might take a year, but you can be very sure that Wargaming will still sell this tank. And the only way to get this vehicle right now is to either get extremely lucky by opening large crates, or, as we use our final boost to get through the kill zone here that the Borask has. Or alternatively, I'm going to switch to an armor-piercing round to be able to save. Or alternatively, it is to open enough crates in sets of 50 that you're guaranteed to be able to get the tank. Because if you've already got the Viper and you've already got the AMBT, then you'll have to buy at most 150 crates to be able to get this tank. That's still like 160 pounds. It's like $200. It's outrageous. Or alternatively, if you don't already have the AMBT and you don't already have the Viper, you might have to open 250 crates to be guaranteed to be able to get this tank. And who knows whether you want to spend all that. This thing's just... It's just the... Almost like it's the ultimate assault tank. Sure, it has some weak points. Has fat armor, the biggest gun that you can get at tier 8, and it throws this gun around like it knows it. So now I want to show you a quick game on Overlord, which has some extra stupid moments in it towards the end, so stay tuned for that. I've already used 2 of my boosts to be able to get into position first, hoping that I'm going to be able to deliver some big shells against my opponents. This game, we are playing against some tier 9 tanks, although it's not really the tier 9s that I'm going to struggle against. But, how's that for shooting tier 9s? Yeah, literally, half the hit points gone off the BZ-120, or the WZ-120, sorry, before the game has even begun. And are we going to be able to get a second shell into the tier 9 Chinese medium tank and make them wince even more? No? Wow, that was possibly one of the closest artillery shells I think I've ever seen in World of Tanks history. Luckily, it doesn't manage to hit me there. Alright, so that 112, I'm going to turn my gun and I'm going to derp them. I get a little unlucky and the shell flies a little high, But then again, I got lucky that I even managed to hit the 112 in that situation. If I'd fired armor-piercing rounds, I think I would have probably been able to go through that tank. However, the HE rounds don't do well against space protection. I'm just thinking to myself, that 112 is incredibly cheeky, and I think I just have to chill here, which is very easy because I've got very good turret armor and 10 degrees of gun depression to hope that they're going to be able to come after us. But I also don't want to let this BZ-176 above me, who's called Anime79, to be able to shut me down. Now, I'm meant to be the anime hero here. So we both whiff shells at each other. The 112 tries to hit me, but he doesn't manage to get me. But I decide, time to boost! And just like that, we've gone through the choke point. Now we're up on the slope now. My boost finishes, and we're in position to go, okay, oh, how the turns have tabled. That's how it's said, right? How the turns have tabled, totally. And yeah, half the hit points off a 112. I don't think I've said half the hit points so many times in a tank review before. It's hard to believe this isn't a tier 10, because this very much could have been a tier 10. I'm very interested to see how the tier 10 will work. Alright, so some more SM. You shoot me. Great. I hit you a little harder, bruv. And that's a low roll. Almost kind of a min roll there. 674 damage out of 800. But, oh, talk about 800 damage. Oh, it's not so funny when you're the one who manages to get snuck up on, right? And the BZ-176 takes a big old chunk out of me. But I'm hoping that we can be able to finish off this tank with a shell. Oh, bad RNG. Otherwise, we might have been able to two-shot that some more SM. So I get shot by the Char Future 4 in the side, and it actually jams my turret, so I'm a little bit disgruntled about that. But I know that the BZ-176 below me has fired a shell, but I don't want to commit because I can't kill them in a single shot. Oh wait, they managed to take some damage now. Maybe I can go? Probably not. A little bit risky in this situation. Still not safe for me. However, with that extra shot and the fact that they're going to fire here, oh, here's my chance. Alright, so my turret traverse is jammed, which makes it a little bit clunky. We low roll! No! I boost! No! I missed the ram! Oh god, you can see the panic with how I turn the mouse to, in awkward fashion. And now, I've ended up behind a house because of my boost. Now the BZ-176 boosts, and then he sees me coming around the corner, but he can't go backwards because he's boosting forwards, but oh, he manages to dirt my tank. What a stupid moment. I had so many idiot wars in the BZ-176, but all in all, I just still kept crunching out reasonable and big damage games. So now we're joining a fight on Ghost Town, and I've only done 1,400 damage in the first 3.5 minutes of this battle, but I thought, hell, let's have an even better game here. Well, it's not going to be like that, is it? Goodness gracious, the HE round's not going through the side of the BZ-176. However, I used the boost to be able to avoid a shell, and then I managed to turn slowly, and I raised the gun while ramming the Iron Arnie to death, completely changing the momentum of this game, catching up on it. Then I put a 807 damage shell into the side of the BZ-176, and just like that, we've turned our vehicle into a weapon with some ramming potential. And if you can afford it on this vehicle, controlled impact can be very nice because it's not the lightest of tanks. It weighs 57 tons, and that is more than enough to be able to ram a lot of different vehicles. And now we're going to boost again because we saved our boosts from earlier to be able to use later on. I'd recommend that you definitely keep at least one, if not two boosts for later on in the battle, because you don't know how useful they're going to be. And they recharge pretty quickly as well. And look, we're ready to go again. Hooray! WZ-120 having a good game of World of Tanks? Well, how about Chinese tank rams you for 274 and finishes you off with a nice shell through the side. And just like that, we've managed to double our result here. But of course, it's not over. We're going to use our final boost. I did speed up the replay there a little bit to get into position, and RNG. Whenever you have extreme guns like this, sure, I'm incredibly lucky to hit the Scorpion for 806 damage. But did you see how in a minute and a half, we completely changed our fortunes this game? It was because of the boost mechanics, and because when you get to save up all of that damage to deliver it, it's kind of like you've got an autoloader within that regards. And sure, it can be extra painful when the shell doesn't go right, but this thing, unlike all of the other super heavy clunky tanks with high alpha damage, with the jet boosters, can kind of get itself out of trouble when a mistake has happened to be able to reload and go again. And these results, they weren't really one-offs. I played 15 games in this tank yesterday with 80% win ratio, averaging near enough 4,000 combined, while blocking on average enough hit damage to be able to destroy my vehicle every single battle, while also spotting and destroying 2 tanks per game. And that's because those rocket boosters allow you to get into position first, and then you can quite often deliver an ambush shot that is going to cripple an enemy tank before other tanks can even get into those positions. When you combine this with an unnecessarily high alpha damage gun, incredible armor, incredible gun depression, and enough view range so it's not blind, this thing is just insanely overpowered in at least my humble opinion. And while I'm sure when the matchmaking is not so favorable and I'm going to be playing against tier 9s and tier 10s again and again and again, I really have no idea what Wargaming were thinking when they were balancing out this one. But oh wait, I probably do know what they were thinking when I thought of what they were balancing this one out. Yeah, they were probably thinking about this. All in all, the BZ-176, I feel that it's a really fun tank to play. It's overpowered as hell, and for players out there who don't really enjoy playing tier 8 all that much, but they just want to make some credits along the way, this one can be really good. However, I will say that bad players are going to do incredibly badly in this vehicle. They won't know how to set it up. They won't know which ammunition to use. They won't know what intuition is and how to be able to use it to give you a tremendous advantage on the battlefield, and they're probably going to miss a lot of their shots, which will leave them incredibly vulnerable to engagement, because even if you kind of min-max this vehicle out, you're still reloading in only 19 seconds. But on the other hand, you know, just like grenade launchers or rocket launchers in other games, of which Wargaming have stuck a bunch on the back of this vehicle, yeah, it's going to be incredibly frustrating to get hit so hard by those kind of players that are just going to hit you for 800, even though they don't know what they're doing and they just get lucky, especially if you're playing in tanks with no armor. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for my tank review on the BZ-176. If you enjoyed the video and you thought it was useful, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know what you think about this tank in the comments down below. Have you played it? Do you think it's awesome? Do you think it's terrible? Have you played against it? Was it absolutely brutal, or did the player suck and you managed to take advantage of it? And do you think this is a whole new level of power creep in World of Tanks? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.